Do you guys see my fancy deck?
Yeah. Although it's not in presenter mode. It's on your screening, the presenter, not the audience mode.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, hello.
What's the difference in the presenter mode?
Well, now I see the audience mode and not what you should see. Oh, we even got a hello from someone already tuning in.
Amber, can you hear me? It's Renee.
Yeah, I can hear you just fine.
Perfect.
We have people from Salt Lake City and Atlanta joining us so far. So that's pretty cool. We're going to get started in just a little bit. Feel free to drop your messages in the chat.
Amber runs a tight ship, 5 minutes.
Right.
She gives everybody a 5-minute window.
Then we get started.
Yeah, I wound up doing, got invited to do something this morning. And it was a good discussion. It was me and there were 2 other groups that were intermediaries kind of talking about apprenticeship broadly. It was pretty good.
Do apprenticeships get posted on LinkedIn?
Sometimes.
It can. Yeah, it can.
Okay.
You know, for us, when we say apprenticeship, we equal job. Like it's a synonymous term.
Right.
For us. I don't know that everybody views it that way. Sometimes it's viewed as an internship and it's a little differently. So, but for us, an apprenticeship is a job and somebody's getting paid and they're hired like a full-time employee. They just have a special designation associated with it.
Am I echoing to you? Okay, go ahead.
Typically, you see those job postings if you're a company yourself, like MasterCard, who happens to have an apprenticeship program, then it might be more appropriate to post that on LinkedIn. Right. Since we're an intermediary, it doesn't make as much sense to do that.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I was curious. I just got off my own podcast, and that was one of the questions that the CISA who was on today talked. She did some analysis of these job postings on LinkedIn, and a question came up about apprenticeships, and I thought about you. I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna ask Tony." Ask you guys.
I mean, there are 50-ish programs out there right now, and everybody does it just a little differently. I don't. In reality, there's only one way to do it. You know, like in terms of just keeping it true to apprenticeship. Could be some of them are academic based, some of them are corporate based, some of them are intermediary based. They're all cut just a little differently.
Right.
You on base today, Shay?
And every day.
Did you guys go remote at all at some point?
So it depends on the organization. For us, obviously, we've been here each and every day. We really have kind of surged largely just to make sure that we can extend the network outside the Texas. So we continue to be here every day.
You are a little quiet, by the way, when you come across on the mic, just a little bit.
Okay. How about now?
A little better.
All right. How about now? All right. Copy.
Thanks everybody for tuning in today. We had a good sign up on Eventbrite, and then the YouTube live stream kind of cast a little bit wider net to it as well. So.
That's great.
To let everyone in the chat know, we're going to kick it off in 1 minute.
We should have a like Alex Trebek tribute here and have the Jeopardy music going around the background. Like that was a treasure for our country lost with Alex Trebek. It's sad.
All right, you can officially get started.
All right, well, good afternoon or good morning if you're on the West Coast. Thank you guys so much for tuning in today for what we have called a Choose Your Own Adventure into Cybersecurity Careers. My name is Tony Bryan. I am the Executive Director for CyberUp. This webinar came to be today. We were approached by our partners at NICE, National Initiative of Cybersecurity Education. They had asked if we would put something on it in honor of National Cybersecurity Career Awareness Week. There's been a lot going on, obviously. Last month was National Cybersecurity Awareness Month. This week is twofold. We have National Apprenticeship Week and National Cybersecurity Career Awareness Week. So it's been a busy one for us with lots of different things, but appreciate you guys joining us for the next 54 minutes for what I hope is a really solid discussion on different sectors. And I'm going to say a good discussion is something maybe a little differently that you haven't heard in the past. As we jump in, I do want to just take a second to talk about what is National Cybersecurity Career Awareness Week. We've all seen the statistics. We all know the data that's out there. There are currently 500,000 or so jobs open in the United States. That number is forecasted to continue to grow. And I've seen various numbers, but 1.5, 2.5, 3.5, right? Whatever way we decide to crack it, the number is really big. And so there's something we have to do about it to help grow awareness of the potential and the potential within a cybersecurity career. And, this is really designed for students, middle school, high school, college students, career changers. There's lots of pathways for you to get in. So the intent of today is to just talk a little bit about that and share. We'll go out in a second. I'm going to introduce the panelists. Then we're going to have a really quick discussion around their sectors, how they got into their sectors, and then just some advice that they would share for you or with you about how to break into that sector. We will open it up to questions. So if you're streaming on YouTube, hop in, ask questions. Amber's managing the chat, so we'll make sure we relay those to the panelists, and then we'll have a couple of final thoughts, closing remarks, and then we'll enjoy the rest of our Thursday afternoon. So a little bit about us. CyberUp, we are a nonprofit. We are headquartered here in St. Louis, Missouri, smack dab in the middle of the country in the Midwest. Our mission is to cultivate the cybersecurity talent pipeline, and we do that in two ways. One, we feel the talent pipeline starts at an early age. The earlier we're getting in front of students, as early as kindergarten to help kids. I mean, I think of perspective of just the amount of kindergartners this year starting school virtually, and they're learning how to Zoom meeting and how to mute things before they know how to read, right? So there's so much impact and implications that it has today and into the future. So we engage kids through cybersecurity competitions virtually, so they have a fun and meaningful way to learn and gain skills. We also have an apprenticeship program that is nationally recognized by the Department of Labor. It serves as a pathway, a non-traditional pathway for individuals to gain skills that are in high demand within the cybersecurity space, and then we help provide them roles and partner with organizations to help connect those individuals to apprenticeship. I covered a little bit about what Cybersecurity Career Awareness Week is. There's a lot of stuff going on, right? If you haven't, check out NICE, hop on their Twitter. There's lots more stuff that you could probably pop on this afternoon and even tomorrow if you still want to continue past this to learn even more opportunities. But there's been a series of events across the country that have been going on centered around just career awareness. The hashtag that if you wanted to follow on Twitter is MyCyberCareer. They've asked a lot of industry professionals just to share their experience and stories with that, with others of how they got into the space. So without further ado, I want to take a second to introduce our panelists for today. A lot of these folks are friends of CyberUp and have done a lot of great stuff for us. Some are board members, right? So it's a great mix. But so first and foremost is Colonel Shay Warakomski. Shay serves on our advisory board. He's out at Scott Air Force Base and is the commander for the 375th Comms Group. Renee Small is, how do I want to describe Renee? She's awesome, right? That's probably the best way I could describe it. She has her own amazing podcast that I'll let her plug when she talks, but is a recruiter and shares just a wealth of information of how you can break into this space, and has lots of guest speakers on her podcast to really share tidbits, best practices, and advice. And in her free time, she's a recruiter and helps people find jobs and then manages lots of kids. So thanks for joining us. Chris Hogan, community partner. He's done a lot locally here in St. Louis of supporting schools, getting kids interested and excited about cybersecurity. In his full-time role, he's a director of corporate security and forensics out at MasterCard. Tony's 2 cents, MasterCard is the poster child for how a cybersecurity team or program should be built from top down corporate structure. And then last but definitely not least, JD Henry. He is a cybersecurity advisor for CISA, which is formerly known as DHS, Department of Homeland Security. He is in the Air Force Reserves. And then when he's not doing that stuff, he hangs out with us and supports our apprentices and helps teach and does a lot of stuff for CyberUp. So thank all of you for joining us today. And then with that, I'm going to turn it over to Shay to talk a little bit about your space, right? And before I hand over to you, the context for the four. So we have representing this panel pathways, right? So military pathway, a corporate pathway, a government pathway, and then Renee kind of sits over all of those within her recruiting job. So Shay, I'd love for you to share with the group a little bit about yourself, value, military, what the military can do and the opportunities that would provide for cybersecurity careers. And if you have some advice for folks that are listening.
All right. Hey, thanks, Tony. And for everybody out there, good morning, good afternoon, based on your geographic location. As Tony mentioned earlier, I'm at Scott Air Force Base, which is just east of St. Louis. I am the commander of the communications group out at the base. And we have about 600 folks ultimately that operate the networks, whether they be the classified, unclassified networks, the voice switch, anything telephony related, if you will. And then we operate actually nuclear command and control satellite terminals as well on behalf of the U.S. Space Force. We happen to be the home of the United States Transportation Command, and so this is the global mobility machine, if you will, Whether we're going to war or whether we're bringing humanitarian aid and efforts to folks across the globe for hurricanes and other kind of natural disasters. In addition, we're also the home of Air Mobility Command. One of my squadrons is responsible for taking in for the 12 bases that are located across the United States, for taking in all kinds of cyber-related information from those bases and acting upon it here locally in conjunction and coordination with U.S. Cyber Command out at Fort Meade, Maryland, as well as we have our home, our service component for cyber. It's out in San Antonio, Texas. But as we venture out today into some of the Q&A, I will tell you I'm a recent transfer or selected for transfer to the U.S. Space Force, and I'll be headed that way in February. So I'm happy to address any of the questions you might have as it relates to cyber, what we do in terms of defensive cyberspace. We also have some offensive cyberspace options as well. Can't talk too much, unfortunately, about that on here, but it's a fascinating world that is available for those who are interested out there. So with that, Tony, I'll turn it over to the rest of the panel.
All right, thanks for that. Great show, by the way, on Netflix, Space Force. If you haven't seen it, Steve Carell does a great job. So Renee, I'll pass it to you. You know what? I'm gonna save you for last. Is that all right? You okay with that? So I'm gonna pass it to you, Chris, from a corporate perspective, a little bit about yourself, how you got into the space, and I think the unique value proposition that a career in corporate security would provide somebody.
Sure. Thank you, Tony. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you. Again, my name is Chris Hogan. I am the director for our corporate security investigations and forensics team here at MasterCard. Now, what does that mean? A lot of cool things. As Shay mentioned, we are more on the blue team side of the house, so very defensive and responsive. We react to things that happen in the MasterCard ecosystem. It is a exciting job. It is one of those operations that I think is important, not just to MasterCard and the financial ecosystem, but critical infrastructure around the world. If people can't make payments, that's a problem. So people like myself and colleagues of mine here at MasterCard, we oversee operations that are around the globe and make sure that our security posture is strong to protect against the threat actors, both internal and external, to MasterCard in that ecosystem. Had an opportunity to see a lot of cool things and be a part of many critical projects all the way over in Singapore, Shanghai, Cape Town. We do a lot of work in the security assessment arena, forensics, as I said, and I also head up our insider threat program, which is one of those programs that's very critical in the corporate space to ensure that not that we're just defending against our threat actors from an external perspective, but also taking a look at our internal infrastructure and making sure that people that actually have legitimate access are doing the right things. So I think, Tony, just the value add in the corporate space, again, is just making sure that people all around the globe can make payments and making sure that that infrastructure stays secure.
I think what's interesting, what I've always appreciated about MasterCard is just the holistic approach. A word I didn't think I was going to use today, a holistic approach. So from the person who's sitting at the security gate when I try to get on campus all the way to the SOC environment, all of that falls under your security team, which is, it incorporates the physical and the digital footprint of MasterCard, which is, I think, is unique, right? And it is an important aspect when you hear stories of hospital breaches and how people are doing that. So appreciate that perspective. JD, I would love to hear your thoughts on just, and you do wear two hats, right? So you've got your military hat and you've got your CISA hat. But for today, some of the value that CISA has out there, you guys have done some really cool stuff as of lately. I know we can't talk a ton about it around election, but just the mission focus that I think CISA provides is amazing. So love to hear your thoughts on just that specific space and some advice for folks looking to get into that.
All right. Yep. I'll explain the pink room first. This is the strongest Wi-Fi signal and the furthest away from the actual remote learning that's going on. So we'll adapt and overcome through that. But I am a cybersecurity advisor with CISA. We are a component under the Department of Homeland Security. We were signed into law as our independent agency in November of 2018. So we're still fairly young as an agency, and we're growing pretty rapidly. They wanted to put a national risk focus on cybersecurity for protection of blasts, like what Tony was just means, and the physical realm. So our primary focus is on criminal homeland security. There are 16 different sectors of critical infrastructure signed into law that we we partner with. So whether or not it's criminal war, industrial base, or as you mentioned with transportation and surface, sea, and air transportation, that is another sector. For a touch of pretty much all of them. So healthcare, utilities, everything to critical to reliable to maintain pretty much a form of critical infrastructure around the river. And we see everything, things coming light to critical services are. So we also work with the state, local, tribal, and territorial governments throughout the country and our overseas territories. So like Tony was alluding to with the election infrastructure that we just wrapped up here, we were very active in ensuring, and now we're still going through and back to working with critical infrastructure and state governments to make sure that they are secure. For advisors like myself, we're located in pretty much every state. So I'm embedded here into St. Louis. I've got scattered throughout the country, so we have a vested interest in that critical infrastructure just as much. So we're not a traditional double agency. We are scattered throughout the country. I think, and now we're to this and coming into a federal career field, there's a ton of opportunities, and we can talk about those as far as being a member of the civil service or whether or not it's contract staff. A lot of opportunity in an agency. The Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency is rapidly growing, and we're always looking to bring good talent and that top tier cybersecurity to be able to help with that important mission that we have. So back to you, Tony.
Great perspective. I think you're all right. So Renee has the pleasure of sitting a little bit over all of this stuff, right? She's worked with multiple corporations and different entities to help find talent. So you've met lots of people. You've got really cool friends in the industry. So, you know, if I'm somebody listening and thinking, man, I really want to get into this space, like what advice would you provide for the 3 different verticals here to get into the space and to get into whatever the choose your own adventure for sector?
Tony?
Yep. Did I freeze up?
Yes.
Uh-oh. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
All right. We're like the commercial. So just for perspective of just all the different, because we just heard from three completely different sectors. Each of those are going to have different requirements or expectations, you know, clearance, degree, whatever. What would you add for those that are listening, centered around just advice and that you would provide for somebody to get into one of these roles?
Sure. Should I introduce myself as well?
Yes, please.
Okay, excellent. So I am Renee Small, cybersecurity super recruiter, and I host or co-host a podcast called Breaking Into Cybersecurity. And my podcast that I co-host, we've done over 150 podcasts at this point, mostly speaking to folks just like you, people who are trying to break into the industry or who most recently have broken into the industry in under 5 years. As Tony alluded to before, my other multiple day jobs are being a mom of 3 rambunctious children who are 9, 6, and 3, and then also being an owner of a cybersecurity recruitment company. And what I do is help leaders hire cybersecurity talent. So, when I listen to what Colonel Shay says, what Chris says, and what JD says, it definitely aligns to a lot of what I've seen in the industry over the years and the people who are being hired. And the advice really, to answer Tony's question is, to explore all different types of industries, different types of roles, be very, very open and flexible when it comes to, choosing a path per se for security and for breaking into the industry. An organization like CyberUp that helps people get into apprenticeships is fantastic because there's just so much breadth amongst that. So my initial big piece of advice, just looking at everyone and hearing from the other panelists and my own experience. So I grew up on the corporate side, mostly in HR, and have had multiple recruitment roles, mostly in technology, and then fast forward and almost exclusively in the financial services industry. I would say probably 80% in financial services, and then branched into other areas and do some government contracting recruiting as well. Again, what I would say is that being open and flexible with looking at opportunities is key.
I think what makes the industry of cybersecurity or InfoSec so attractive is that it has so many different verticals and opportunities where somebody can pick what they want to focus on, right? CyberSN, I think they put out 42 different roles that are out there, and that varies from highly technical to pen testing and incident response to more business focused, where it might be recruiting, talent acquisition, or insider threat stuff where you're doing phishing campaigns and really doing internal training, right? So there's so many different verticals within this. And, with the three different groups that are represented, if I decide I want to go work for the military, I'm very mission focused, and I'm proud of doing those things that the military would offer. If I want to go work for CISA, there's a national security that would be teeter for both government and the military. But on a corporate side, the mission is still there. It's just very different. And I would say the one thing as a veteran myself, I've been blown away by just the teamwork and camaraderie that has come with this industry and the willingness and openness for others to reach out, help people, and want to get into the space, right? And mentor and coach those things. So I do have questions teed up for the group, but I also want to make sure I throw it out to anybody who is watching to have questions and answer those.
Yeah, we do have some questions already. So as someone who's acting to transfer into this field, they're finding it difficult due to the lack of experience, even with a cybersecurity degree, like CISA Plus certification and 9 years of experience in telecom networking. Any advice on how to approach the job search?
I'll jump in on that one because it comes up so very often on the podcast. Just this morning, 2 hours before this, we hosted a podcast and we talked about this very topic, how difficult it is sometimes to break into the industry. And I will be honest, what we've seen is that it is pretty difficult to get in through your normal channels. I guess it's difficult overall, but definitely through the normal channel. So applying to opportunities, it's going to be more difficult. We just pulled some data and did some research and saw that the quote unquote entry level opportunities most of them looked for 5 years experience in a CISSP, which is, contradictory, right? So what one person has come on my podcast and he I took a saying from him that I told him I was going to steal from him, and I'm going to give it to you all today. And he said, one of the things he said, on top of getting your degree and getting your education and everything else, is to weaponize social media for your career. And what he meant by that is, if you're on LinkedIn, if you're on YouTube, if you're on Twitter, wherever you are, and you can get into a community on social media and share all that you're learning, all that you're doing, and pretty much showcase your work, and showcase, even at the very minimal level, showcase that, engage with leaders, engage with hiring managers in these different spaces, then people will start to begin to notice you and realize who you are. And that is a one aspect or another way to, not just be a blank resume going into an applicant tracking system, aka black hole, of security jobs. So you want to be as visible as possible. Some of the tips that we've gotten, people have created blogs. Some of the blogs, people have created podcasts. And we joke around and say, hey, if your podcast is just you and your mom listening to it initially, that's okay. But being able to really take a look at what you're doing, regurgitate it. Sometimes the way some of us learn best is by being able to teach someone else or explain it to someone else. And if you're a writer and you can explain through writing, blog. If you're a talker and you can explain through podcasts or video, do that. If you're the type of person that likes to put together PowerPoint presentations and, step through it that way, then showcase what you're learning. And that's just one way for people to start to notice you, so that you don't feel discouraged by like applying to hundreds of positions, because we've heard things like that before. So weaponize social media for your career. That is my tip for trying to break into the industry.
Anybody else want to weigh in on the question?
Yeah, I'll just echo what Renee mentioned, especially on the social media side of things. What I've noticed, I'm on Twitter, but I don't really tweet. I follow a lot of information security, cybersecurity experts. And what I start to see with some of those feeds are people reaching out to those that are looking to get into the field, people that may be directors or VPs or have opportunities for others to kind of step into their organizations. And so utilizing their network of people on Twitter, they're reaching out saying, hey, if you're looking to get into cybersecurity, post your jobs here, or DM me here and we can talk about it. And I've noticed a lot of success in that little space in my experience.
So we'll sprinkle an extra layer to this question for Shay and JD. Let's add that same person is trying to break into the government space. They don't have a clearance. What would you suggest in that front?
So I can kick it off, Jay, if you want. One of the things I would add, and let me harken back real quick to, Tony, you mentioned it before. We're mission oriented. We're not profit driven, and so from that standpoint, I think it takes a special person to come in, be brought into the fold, and once you've joined the military, you'll notice there's a certain family, this camaraderie and esprit de corps that you'll hear people talk about. Very much a teaming effort. I just want to highlight that portion. It's not to say there's anything wrong, clearly, with various organizations being profit driven. I just want to highlight that there, in and of itself, is a real dichotomy in terms of how we approach the mission that we go about. And so, in terms of how you enter the military, one of the best ways to pad your resume or to build the skills is to come in. There's basically two various options for you. To come in as a non-commissioned officer, someone who is enlisted, or to come in as a commissioned officer, to start out as a lieutenant or an ensign in the case of the Navy. And so basically, to be an officer, you have to have a degree. You can go various routes, whether it be through a surface academy to get that degree. We have officer training school or officer candidate schools. Or you can go through a regular university and go through a ROTC type program to go that route. Obviously, anything that's cybersecurity related, EE, electrical engineering, those sorts of very technical types of degrees, that is your best opportunity to get your foot in the door through a commissioning source. There are, of course, certifications that you would expect just like you would on the outside, whether that be, it's the Security Plus and the CISA, the PMPs. Those sorts of things help you out tremendously. If you're coming in from the enlisted side of the house, those folks may be relatively young. You may not have any college experience. And so from that standpoint, just scoring well on the aptitude types of tests. But once you're in the door, there's incredible opportunities in terms of the post 9/11 GI Bills, tuition assistance that's provided year after year, that coincides, oh, by the way, with the existing commitment that you have toward the service. So there are opportunities abound, quite honestly, to be able to fill out your resume, to acquire the training and education that you desire. And of course, you're going to network with industry because we lean on industry so heavily for what we do day to day.
Yeah. To speak a little bit further on that, a clearance is required for many of the jobs, but it's not something that is a prerequisite to interview. Really, we're just looking for talent for the most part. If you're selected, you'll be put in for a clearance. There is challenges for federal hiring. And the speed of onboarding is something that can be kind of daunting, to be able to make sure that those things are in place before you can be fully onboarded into the federal government. But there's all different walks of cybersecurity within the federal government and so many different agencies, to include Colonel Warakomski speaking uniformed member. When I first met Shay, I was as a civilian, a non-uniformed member of the DoD, where we were working together in a past assignment of his. But there's a lot of different ways. USAJobs.com is the actual federal government hiring site for. There's federal also CISA.gov. You'll see when those are being advertised. One of the best sites that we have available to us is NICS, the National Initiative for Cybersecurity Careers and Studies. On that site, there's a career pathways tool. So what Tony was alluding to earlier about segmenting out of cybersecurity, there's the skills communities within cybersecurity that you could fall into one of these different roles on. It'll map that out so you can really kind of find where you're trying to, your trajectory you want to lead yourself to. But if you go there, it's NICS, NICCS.CISA.gov, and I'll throw it in the chat here so that you guys can see it. Those are some tools that I would recommend at least being familiar with, and could help you trying to break through that barrier.
Were there any more questions from the chat?
Yeah, so the next one's kind of a comment / question. So this person says they believe that there's two reasons why we're still seeing an issue filling these jobs. Number one, we as a culture still reward the social media star and not the person protecting the systems, possibly since recently, because they believe they're now seeing the practical reasons of security due to the pandemic. And then number two, they also, a little less since the pandemic, still attend events and talk about, so they attend events and talk about the CISO not being respected by a director or CEO of an organization due to other items. So they're wondering, how do you see this improving? Like, we can ask them to maybe drop any kind of clarifying questions in the chat. You guys need it?
Yeah, I mean, for me, as we've gone through and have had multiple conversations with organizations, we've really had to look at it from two perspectives, from a talent acquisition side and a hiring manager side. And those are two very different things. The talent acquisition side, what Renee described as the black hole of keywords and buzzwords and resume and computer filtering. Like, oftentimes you have to beat a computer, especially in like the USA job side, right? The keywords in a government application is massive. What we've just seen on the corporate side, on the hiring manager side specifically, is the Chris's of the world, right? Like he wants somebody who's got some hard skills, a good attitude, and a willingness to learn and grow. And I would, we often say tenacity and grit, and that's going to be enough for Chris to say, "Hey, I'm in," right? I'll bring this person on my team. However, that has to be complemented with beating the system. So, I guess reiterating the aspect that Renee had hit on earlier is just the importance of meeting people like Chris and Shay and JD and Renee to have those one-to-one connections. So when you do apply at a MasterCard, you can ping at Chris and say, "Hey, I hit up this job in this team. Do you mind having a conversation this?" Because it does help within that. Did they provide any clarifying context for their question? I haven't seen, maybe Chris, I'll pass it to you, but I haven't seen too many disconnects from CISO down to director, and maybe you just happen to have a very unique boss with Ron that does that really well. But I'll pass it to you.
Yeah, I can't say I've seen that here at MasterCard. It's unfortunate that maybe in some sectors there is that disconnect. Just touching back on what you mentioned, Tony, and just the whole recruiting aspect of things, I'm more of a hands-on type of manager. So, rather than just sit and wait for keywords to kind of come back and show me resumes of people that match the criteria, I'm a little bit more proactive, and I'll go and, like I said, dive into the grassroots and seek out people that are really looking for those opportunities. And if they don't have the skill set or not necessarily matched for a role in my organization, corporate security is huge here at MasterCard. We employ over 700 people, so there's bound to be a position somewhere that might be right for them. Or further down in my network, there's a huge community in cybersecurity here in St. Louis. So maybe somebody over at Energize or Enterprise or Edward Jones. The list goes on. So I don't know what this individual is experiencing, but I really haven't seen that in my circles here in MasterCard.
It's Judy. I can probably speak a little bit to the second half of that question. Generally, what we find a lot of times is that when we're looking at business and cybersecurity, our cybersecurity professionals, one of the greatest things you can do for yourself is understand to speak the business language. If CISO is focused on cybersecurity, but they're not translating that well to how that incorporates the business or the critical service that you provide, you are going to struggle. And your CISO and your entire security team and your IT team are going to struggle because they're going to be looked at as a support function of business. They are not the operational entity that is what's keeping and people's paychecks coming. So make sure that you can translate that to business value. Otherwise, you will just be a cost center, and your seat at the table won't be as strong as people you're sitting in that room. So for anybody in cybersecurity, I always try to say, if you're going to do some significant self-improvement, learn about the business and learn about what's keeping the business profitable and how you translate into that value stream.
If I'd like to add about the first part of the question, rewarding the social media stars, my point would be this. Again, if a person is trying to stand out, it's just the nature of the way recruiting is, and it's very difficult to sometimes do that when you are just applying to a role and going into, as Tony's point, a black hole. So when you're dealing with keywords and having to really have your resume reflect every role that's posted. So, the people who are going to showcase what they're doing, and them themselves being proactive and being, quote unquote stars per se, or just individuals who are showcasing their work will eventually get more looks. I don't think that is, I just think that's that's just the nature of what's happening right now, and how to differentiate yourself from everyone else when it comes to looking for opportunities.
And I would real quickly echo JD's sentiments on that second half as well. The ability for the CISOs out there to clearly and concisely articulate impacts to the CEOs, the COOs, and so forth, that's an absolute imperative. And I would tell you on the military side of the house, there's an inextricable linkage. Cyberspace obviously serves as the underpinnings for all the missions that we perform across the board, to the extent that we have an entire combatant command centered around cyberspace operations. So I think there's a growing appreciation, particularly in light of COVID. I think you see it across the board, but certainly across the Department of Defense, you see a growing appreciation for all that our cybersecurity personnel accomplished day in and day out.
I joke pretty often that somebody made a job description 8 years ago, and that same job description has been cut and pasted over and over and over again that required a CISSP. And it's just, whoever wrote it, we need to find that person, hunt them down, and reset expectations for hiring and how to beat the computer. More questions?
That's actually a great segue into our next question of, when hiring for an entry-level cybersecurity position, do you want to see certifications? And if so, which ones are reasonable to expect from a candidate for an entry-level position?
It's a good question.
We are currently in the midst of doing a lot of hiring. And I think one of my supervisors, when we were going through and we were asking the exact same question about how do we prioritize the candidates and what skill sets we were looking for. I think a lot of times, every position we go into, and because we've taken cybersecurity and broken it out into these skills communities with these different roles, a lot of times it's going to be very difficult to do hiring to be able to hire for a specific skill set. A lot of times we tend to hire the person and train to the skill set. And I think that you see a lot of that type of approach, that it doesn't matter. We're not going to find the perfect fit. It's just probably unrealistic as a hiring manager to think that the perfect person's going to walk in. There's going to be some of that employer type of support to be able to get that person to be successful in that role. So the certifications help. They definitely get you put into a consider for further or to put into that further consideration pile. But be able to clearly communicate the value you can provide, again, to that organization, whether or not it's a certification, a degree, or just that willingness to be there and be present and active with the organization.
I'll go back to what Tony had mentioned earlier about the job description. We as managers, hiring managers, have to get better about making job descriptions that are more reasonable. I've seen some out there for entry-level positions that it just makes no sense at all. A person wouldn't have five years of experience doing anything because they're just getting into the industry. What's important for me, if you have a certification, that's great. But when we really sit down in that interview and you demonstrate a willingness to be a part of a team and work hard and have the aptitude to pick up things on the fly, that's really what's important to me. So you're kind of battling two different struggles there. One, to actually get your foot in the door to get the interview, but then once you have that interview, being able to demonstrate that you can perform that entry-level job without having all the credentials behind your name. So for me, it's good to have certifications, but it's more so about the person for me.
I have seen and heard from a number of security leaders and CISOs, and what we've heard doing, again, over these 100 or so podcasts, is that very similar to what Chris and JD are both saying. I would add that leaders like to see that some kind of experience is showcased. And when I say experience, obviously, if you're entry level, you won't have a lot of experience. However, what you can showcase is your self-directed projects. You can showcase your related coursework. You can showcase all of the, when I talked about, weaponizing social media, the blogs that you're working on, anything that you're learning, and you can show, like, I actually am doing a little bit of that. They like that. That's what I've heard consistently over any type of certification. So I've heard that kind of trumps it all. And then when it comes to certifications, obviously, the more, the Security Plus, I know on the government contracting side, typically is enough to get you through the criteria would be the Security Plus. But overall, what I've heard over 100 plus, almost 150 interviews is that showcasing the experience, downloading the free versions of the different tools, playing with them, and kind of saying, this is what I did with it. That really seems to spark interest. It shows passion. It shows that you're actually doing what you say what you say you learned. It shows that you're doing it. And the leaders that we've spoken to seem to like that.
I would just add, I think every panel member has been absolutely on point. And the answer is it depends to some degree based on what that entry level position is. I can tell you in the case of the military and in the civilian side of the DoD, in most cases, it's aptitude and a propensity for those technical skills. And once you have your foot in the door, obviously you're going to get much of the training and education that you need to be able to perform your job.
When I have conversations and prep our candidates for interviews with organizations, I give a few words of advice. One, the industry hiring managers of the field are looking for somebody who treats this as a trade, right? So I make the reference as a carpenter. If I'm a carpenter, I can probably nail and hammer a board as I get started as an apprentice, but as I grow and I make my craft better, I'm going to build fine furniture. I think what makes this particular space hard as opposed to like coding, if I'm a coder, I can hop on GitHub and like have a repository and show and highlight some of my work. It's much harder to physically display the things you're doing unless you're embedding it to what Renee suggested around that social media to be able to highlight that. But as you're looking to get into it, an employer wants somebody who's investing into themselves, investing into the industry, and wants to find a go-getter who really views this as a trade, and they want to be a perpetual learner and constantly improve and make their skills better. More questions?
No more questions at this time.
All right. So I think we covered, I'm going to throw this one out here. And this will be for everybody. What would be the first step that you would advise somebody in taking to get a career in your specific sector?
I'll kick it off. I think the very first step before you go to recruiting office, before you hop online, or maybe you hop online, but talk to people, particularly if you're around an installation and there are people that you see each and every day that you can sit down and ask some of the critical questions to. And if they don't know the answers, they know somebody who does. For those in locations who aren't necessarily around an installation, or simply don't know anybody in the military, then your next best source, obviously, is to hop online and see what opportunities are out there. But start the search. Just begin. Take action.
I'll echo Colonel Shay there. Talk to people. There's tons of people in the industry that are here in St. Louis as well, that are willing to be mentors, willing to kind of share their experience and kind of help you along the way. I think once you get a little bit of what they experience and what their journey has been, if it's something that interests you, you're one step further to getting into your career just by having that relationship and that connection with that individual. So totally echo Colonel Shay's comments there.
So I think for me, I would be just to let any opportunity go by. We say the term that cybersecurity is everyone's responsibility. You may not get the perfect job right away, but it doesn't mean that you're not going to be part of the cybersecurity process or the actual the business units themselves. You may be in the IT side, but that's where most of us probably started. Cybersecurity wasn't really its own kind of niched out field when I started. It's something you didn't pick, you just kind of fell into because a necessity showed somebody to be part of it. But it was more of a collateral to the greater IT system. So don't necessarily, if it's not the right cybersecurity job we're looking for, there's probably still a lot of good value that you can get from that and experience to be able to further you towards that end goal. But I wouldn't sit back and admire the problem. If an opportunity comes up, make the best of it and be prepared and be in that mindset.
And I would add on, I mean, everyone's already said a little bit of what I was going to say. To add on to what JD just said, you know, definitely being a part of thinking about where you are today and being able to pivot off of what you're already doing. So if you are already, you know, in communications or there's been so many people that we've spoken to over the last, 2 years we've been doing this podcast, where they've talked about how they pivoted from other, other professions. We had a Krispy Kreme manager who turned into a cybersecurity person. We had Uber drivers become cybersecurity professionals. We've had people, I'm about to have on a nurse who is now, she was an emergency room nurse, and she's pivoted into security, and they've all utilized what they were already in and kind of took on a little bit of security within the spaces they were already in. So I'm going to double down on what JD said, utilize where you are. I'm always in HR, but I was in HR when I was plucked to go over to my organization's threat and vulnerability management space because of some of the things I brought to the table from an HR perspective. In addition, my part 2 to this is when Chris said talk to people and Shay said come in and, meet with folks and learn about the industry, just like you would follow your favorite sports person, you would follow your favorite, reality TV person, whoever you want to follow your favorite cybersecurity people. There are some social media stars out here, follow them, look into what they're doing, start to ask questions. The one thing that has come up over and over again, and I said this recently, is that in the security space, people are so willing to help, much more willing than a lot of professions. We had a person that came on the podcast about a year ago, and he said he was coming out of finance and he worked at JP Morgan Chase. And I believe Jamie Dimon is still the CEO right now until they transition to their next CEO. But he said, there's no way I could reach out to someone like Jamie Dimon and get a response. But he can reach out to some of the highest cybersecurity leaders and they will respond. So follow people on social media, and think about how you can be helpful in security right in the role where you are right now.
I think we're just at an interesting time. There are not many CISOs that are currently working for large or small corporations or even the government that has taken a traditional path, right? They went to high school, they got a 4-year degree, they jumped into a junior cybersecurity analyst role and worked their way up the food chain, right? They probably started at a help desk and worked their way to this, and they moved in to different verticals. I think being not overlooking the value of a help desk role or a technical technician role, because they get you a foot in the door. And if you continue to have those conversations with industry professionals and commit to your craft, you then have a baseline of skills, right, or technical skills that you can then transition into that security role. And all of that work experience does help you check boxes on that 3, 5, 7-year requirement that companies are looking for. SANS degree, right? Like that's an important part to take a look at. We have 3 minutes left. And so I do want to say, if there's any kind of final advice, you know, when Amber and I were trying to come through and think of a good, clever title for this, right? Like it took me back to my middle school days of reading the white choose your own adventure books, right? Where if you did this, you went down a certain path. And I would say, you know, this industry is very much like that, right? You're gonna come up into a job, and you're gonna be presented with an option, and there's no right or wrong A or B. Like obviously in the choose your own adventure book, sometimes it was death or you got ate by a dragon. That's not going to happen in this particular space. But there are lots of things, and just be open to advice, suggestions, and I think opportunity, and you'll find your way into the space. So with that, I'd love to turn it back to everybody. If you have any kind of final thoughts, any words of advice, you know, for people that tuned in today.
I would say don't give up. I know some people who are trying to break in right now. It is difficult. It is a struggle. But please, 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 if you are interested in the industry, reach out to us. I believe I saw a question come up in the chat about connecting or reaching out to us on LinkedIn. Anybody can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm totally happy to, you know, be a connector. That's all I do. Connect people to other folks, leaders, to talent to leaders. So happy to do that, and just stay, you know, be resilient. Like if you want it, just go after it. It may take, you know, a number of years for you to get yourself into the right spot. But do not give up. We've seen a couple people out here saying, hey, I'm giving up. Do not give up. It's the right opportunity for you is right around the corner. Do not give up.
Yeah, I'll echo Renee's comments. You have to be hungry. Just be hungry for it. If cybersecurity is what you want, if you want to be a CISO, if you want to be a director, or whatever your career path in cybersecurity, just be hungry for it. My own personal story, you know, I started as a tape operator, backup tape operator, way back in the 90s. And here I am, you know, 20 plus years later, sitting as a security director. So you just have to be hungry and will yourself to go after what it is that you want in this career.
I'll go ahead and jump in. I think, you know, the final piece is a lot of people would tell you, we don't have the experience, I don't have the education or the background yet, and I would tell you that the military is a great place to start. That's what you want to do, is acquire those years of experience, acquire some of the certifications, the degrees, all at a very low cost, at any cost to you as a member. It's just a great opportunity, and there are a lot of fringe benefits aside from that in terms of the team that you would be.
Yeah, the only other advice, and to kind of echo the rest of the panelists, you really have to be passionate about what you do. If you bring that passion with you, either to the job interview or into the work, you're going to be successful. Don't get blinded or chase dollar signs. Generally, that's when our careers start to fade and fizzle out. Make sure that it's something that you enjoy doing, and it's going to be very difficult to fail if you bring that type of passion to your work every day.
All right, I had to click unmute mute like 7 times. So I appreciate all the panelists today, your insights, your perspective. I enjoyed listening and I enjoyed the discussion, so I appreciate your time. For everybody else that tuned in, I appreciate you guys listening and hope you took a lot away from today's discussion. Happy National Cybersecurity Career Awareness Week to everybody. And a day late, but for those that serve, happy Veterans Day as well, especially for you, Shay, and I'll say JD too, right? You're not in uniform today, but to yourself. Thank you guys for tuning in. If you haven't, obviously subscribe to our YouTube channel that you're now watching. There are tons of great videos, whether it be webinars, podcasts, or really good how-to guides, right? There's lots of information out there that Renee had alluded to. just learning, right? What is cryptography? What are those things? There's a lot of great resources on the page that we've had lots of smart people come in and give us some advice on that. So thanks for tuning in. Have a great day and talk soon.